Yes, we're going to start then. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar today. Thank you all for being here. My name is Megan Clement. I work for Gloria Media here in Paris, and I'm going to be chairing today's session. I'll just start with a little rundown of how things are going to go today. First, we're going to have a lovely introduction from Francesco Grillo, who's the Director of Vision. After Francesco's little scene setting, we're going to go to our three introducers. We've got three people from the University of Siena, Luca, Verzichelli, Anoa Oliver, and Ilaria Manchetti. They're going to present for a short time each, and then we're going to go to our discussants who will respond to what we've heard. So that's Kalypso Nicolaidis from the European University Institute, am I right? The EUI? And then Sabrina Cavatorto and Valentina Carlino, both from the University of Siena. We have got a very, very meaty topic today. Is democratization over? We're talking about nothing less important than the future of democracy on this continent. So I know that you're going to have lots of questions. There will be time for a Q&A at the end where everybody who has a question can submit it. Valerio, maybe you can confirm how people can do so. Can they put that question in the chat?
Yes, there is a Q&A section where they can ask their questions, then we can respond.
Lovely. And I think I do apologize. I think I've forgotten to introduce one of our speakers. Koert Debeuf is also here. My apologies to you, Koert. I'll just ask everybody, and a good reminder to myself, to put ourselves on mute when we're not talking and sharing our ideas. And yes, I think without further ado, we are going to hand over to Francesco to kind of set the scene and kick us off.
Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome everybody to the 6th edition of the Siena conference on the Europe of the future. This is the very first episode of our project, this monster that we will try to tame. It's a very ambitious project, very complex, and let me welcome everybody here. A number of the participants today are aficionados of the conference, including Luca, Valentina, Valerio, but I think it's also probably worthwhile to possibly tell everybody something on the distinctiveness of the project and also of the process that we will try to follow to produce the ideas that Europe probably needs. So let me, you have the slide here, I suppose. Megan, you have it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so the title is how can we use democracy / citizenship as a lever for integration, and Luca will better explain what do we mean. But let me tell you a little bit something on the conference on the Europe of the future. It is not an academic conference. I myself, I am a quasi academician. It is different. It is not what we call in Italy a convegno, where everybody says something and then goes away. This is what we call a platform for problem setting and problem solving. Basically, the idea is to create a place very interdisciplinary where we can actually go beyond analysis towards pragmatic ideas that the European institution can also, how can I say, realize in a relatively short time. So it's a very pragmatic sort of objective. The other distinctiveness is that it is very much multi-partisan. We have as a partner the 5 political foundations that act as a think tank of the 5 big political families. This very year, we will also have the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which is in fact not strictly European, but a German foundation, very close to the CDU. And surprise, surprise, we will also have the Patriots. We will welcome the Patriots in Siena. And I am personally rather happy about that. We will put together business, media, academics, which who are really convinced about this interdisciplinary paradigm, and policymakers. We will have, well, all EU countries, a little bit of an exaggeration. We will have the major EU countries. We will have about 100 participants. The gender balance will be, I think, 50%, almost precisely. We will also have a strong quote-unquote representation of young generation, starting from students, who are very, very important. And we will also have people from outside the EU, China, India, USA, Ukraine, and of course, many British friends. So it's not exactly just a conference, but it is a project that starts before the conference and goes beyond the conference. Very quickly, the process is a little bit like that. We will introduce this very chart also in the next webinars, so that we hopefully will understand at least partially this workflow. We as Vision proposed a number of questions. Here we call it strategic notes to be untied, no? And you will find them into the agenda. We are also finalizing an initial concept paper. This thing will be translated into, will be answered by a problem setting paper that Luca and students have already circulated for this very webinar. Then we have this webinar. On the webinar is meant to give to the group feedbacks, and on the basis of these feedbacks, the group will fine-tune the papers to be presented in Siena at the physical conference. In Siena, there will be the problem setting / solving group dedicated to democracy and to the other 4 topics. Immediately after the problem solving group, the students with their tutor, possibly the chair, Megan, and possibly somebody, some discussant will translate this thing into a short paper to be presented in the final plenary session on the Saturday in the Palazzo del Comune in Siena. And this will be part of this final paper, the Pontignano Manifesto, that we then want to present, discuss, advocate for with the European institution. So thank you very much. And Megan, the word is back to you, and then to Luca, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Francesco. And I, for one, am so excited to get started on this incredibly important work at this incredibly important moment, and to get really stuck into this problem solving and setting and solving rather should be the way around that it is. So thank you, Francesco, for introducing us there to what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. I'm going to go now to our first introducer, Luca Verzichelli. Luca, over to you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thanks to Francesco. It's nice to see all of you, and welcome. Although I'm not the organizer, but to some extent, the Pontignano means University of Siena. So I'm so happy that the University of Siena is hosting the part of the conference in person, and I really look forward to seeing all of you there. It will be fun. And special welcome back to Kalypso, who was already one of the protagonists, and also to Koert. I think that I will not insist on the structure of this sort of exploratory set of ideas, because I don't want to burn too much time for the young presenters who are representatives of our classes of the Public and Cultural Diplomacy course in Siena. I just want to mention, especially for the other seniors who are supposed to discuss, to some extent, to improve this kind of very general platform, to some extent a sort of ingenious platform. The idea that this time we wanted to combine somehow the idea to improving and enhancing democracy at the European Union level, together with the strategy of redirection of democracy at large, given the nature of the crisis of democratic representativeness. And actually, I'm just coming from an afternoon in which I was following the very boring situation of the Italian referendum. But in any case, we know that the quorum will be not reached. We are going to have no more than 30% of the voters. So we have a problem. We have a number of problems within the context of the European Union, and we've been discussing a lot already how to implement different kind of solutions. This time, even with the help of the young participants of this panel, we wanted to some extent to start from the scratch, combining some aspect of a general recipe for the European Union, a democracy, and to reach a new set of procedures, a responsible policy making within the European Union machinery, and so on and so forth, to something that we have called a more conscious supranational sense of citizenship, in order to enhance this kind of procedures. Of course, the results can be found a little bit naive, because we put on the table a number of things, and I have to thank not only the students actually, but even Sabrina and Valentina for their input. And I would like to leave now the floor to Ilaria and Anoa, who are probably going into the details of these 4 pillars that we found in these very explorative papers. Thanks.
Thank you, Luca. Yes, let's go straight over to Anoa Oliver and Ilaria Manchetti.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone hears me well. First of all, when we drafted the paper, we were a good group of students. So there are other people who are not in this webinar that also participated in drafting this brief, that I particularly want to thank as well. We divided our paper in 3 main parts that would give concrete actions. We decided that it would be concrete actions that could improve inclusions, especially of young people in the diplomatic and political world. So we created an education subsection, soft power section that Ilaria will talk about, and then representation, deliberative democracy. So when it comes to education, it's basically the main idea that we have was enhancing critical thinking. So we give information to people about what is happening in the world and also within the European Union politics, and then they make their own, they create their own thought on the issue. We also talked about European school curriculum. We want to emphasize on this European citizenship without emphasizing on transnational European citizenship and common identity. So we need to share a European study and European story and European perspective in national school curriculums into the topics. So it can be either in history, politics, sociology, law, without, of course, juxtapose on national patterns. We want to, yes, talk about European common background without overstepping on national feelings. We also want to help children, students being included in programs and political simulation. Fun, we realize that fun and education do not have to be opposite, and knowledge about mechanisms of European politics should be transferred through simulations in school. And we also want to find a compromise in democracy. We want to give opportunity to children and students to design the agenda of this simulation themselves, so they can also learn to express their political interest and engage with the society they live in. And it can also increase the likelihood of young people engaging in traditional political structure afterwards. We're also thinking of enhancing Erasmus exchanging for pupils of secondary schools. So the European Union should grant specific funding that would be allocated for secondary school students exchange programs, because not everyone can afford to go abroad or to welcome someone in their home when it comes to exchanges. And yet many students may harbor that desire. So it could be relatively short 3 months exchange program that should exist not just between certain member states, but within the European Union at large. And we were thinking, we decided that we needed to also restructure that part about European degree and fast tracking European degree. Well, we have most of the students that participated in this paper are European students that are not from Italy. And we faced, although we were from the European Union, we faced quite some problem when it came to enrolling in an Italian university. It's not just Italy, it's every country. So we decided to try and facilitate transfers and yes, just enrolling in European Union universities. And I will just finish with representation before leaving the floor to Ilaria on soft power, but the representation would be mostly about European consistencies. So social media and online presence can do a lot, but at the core of representation, there should still be the presence of our representative in the offline world. So as to the European Parliament, many voters barely know their MEP. I personally don't know my MEP, and most of them have never met him or her or been in direct touch with them. On the one hand, it shows the significance of the mentality of public representatives at large to actively search for contact with their constituency. And on the other hand, the electoral system, at least for European elections, should be reformed. And for future election, the European Parliament should have actual constituencies with direct representation. And by requiring election through popular vote in constituencies, the representativeness of the European mandate could be fostered. And we also had the idea of creating an annual youth seminar, which is a big step, but it would basically be creating a seminar that gathers young students from European Union country. Every year would approach a different theme, and it would take place in a different location. So if a year we want to try and advocate for climate change solutions. We will invite students from universities all around the world, the European Union, sorry, that would create EU-funded projects to tackle these issues, and it would take place, for example, in a eco-friendly city, and this would adapt to the kind of theme we adopt according to the every year. And we were also thinking of youth quotas in municipal and regional representative councils that should be encouraged to adopt youth quotas to ensure that in an aging society, young people are not underrepresented. And it will also reaffirm inclusive participation and ensure that decision-making reflects intergenerational trust and compromises. So thank you very much.
Anoa, thank you so much for that. First two prongs of what we're going to be discussing today. I'm just going to announce a very quick change to the program. I've just heard that, excuse me, Koert Debeuf needs to leave us at 6:30. So Ilaria, if you don't mind, I'm hoping we can throw to Koert now so he can make his contribution, even though we haven't heard your bit yet, and then we'll come straight back to you and go on from there. Is that okay? Great. Koert, I think I've got you. We've got 7 minutes of your time. So if you're there, please pipe up. This is Koert Debeuf from the Free University of Bruxelles.
Oh, thank you very much. I will be pretty short, actually. I think that what I heard, I mean, I liked so far. So, and I think indeed that it's perhaps time for more and more radical ideas. I think the state of democracy is not so good in Europe, not just in Europe, obviously. So what we see in the United States is not very comforting either. But I mean, we have been pleading, I mean, in this conference years ago, indeed, for a direct election of the president of the European Council or European Commission. Indeed, I mean, what is the way to involve more our MEPs with the citizens? So far, it looks like they're pretty far away. So it's also a problem right now that the power of the European Parliament is actually decreasing instead of increasing. It has been increasing for about 15 to 20 years since 2001, and now we see it decreasing. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of foreign policy on the agenda, so also a lot of defense items that are popping up, obviously, which are indeed two topics that the European Parliament has no authority of. So we see things evolving very quickly on a geopolitical level on which the European Parliament has no say at all. So this is a problem. It's also a democratic problem. And this should be addressed in one way or another. So we are discussing treaty change, of course, already for many years, and everybody is almost against it. But I think that if this conference can do something, indeed, just like also Romano Prodi has been pleading for years, is that we indeed need a change to make things indeed more democratic, where discussions are being done in the parliament and the parliament with the citizens. And this is so we can increase again the democratization of the EU instead of the current trend of decreasing. So, and for this, I'm hoping that the conference will indeed be able to put some more radical ideas on the agenda and make sure that this, well, sad trend is good. Like to say, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really rousing call to arms there for us all to get a bit radical. And with that in mind, let's hear from our next introducer for the second half of the position paper that we're discussing today, Ilaria.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So as Anoa previously mentioned, I'm going to introduce our second part, let's say, of our paper, which is more focused on soft power and cooperation. So we divided this part in subsections, which I'm going to present to you briefly. So the first thought that we had about so concerning soft power and cooperation, is a possible European decade of culture. So basically the best way to highlight our common European heritage through culture means and special funding dedicated to this goal. And this could mean movies related to people and events that incarnate European values or played a significant role in the history of Europe. So museum, galleries, exhibition illustrating the various cultures that we have in Europe, histories and system across the EU would make them more appreciated, especially for young people. And then we thought about mobilities for apprentices, workers, and public agents. And by this, we mean that we thought that the Erasmus program should be promoted among so apprentice and young workers, understanding that the benefits of being part of such a diverse union. And this must apply particularly to those who are not or were not part of the higher education system. So by granting Erasmus funding to apprentices for schools and work experiences abroad, we could democratize the program and foster craftsmanship across the continent. And along this same line, we suggest exchange programs between military and administrative officials of different nationalities, regional and municipal administrations. And this would allow them to realize exchange program, foster language skills, for example, and make public agents learn from each other across the European Union. Then we thought about a common European digital identity, meaning that individuals and businesses should be able to communicate with national administration across the Union via one European digital identity based on national identification system, for example, ID cards, tax numbers, and stuff like this. So this would also incentivize the digitalization of national administrations to overcome the bureaucratic lowlands of disjunct national systems. And also along this line, then we thought about how to possibly avoid maybe over complex and bureaucratic language when communicating with audiences. So the communication of institutions at all levels is often too bureaucratic and hardly accessible. So also, we know that sometimes, or I mean, most of the time, the fact of depicting complex matter in overly simplified ways is often criticized, but language accessibility to the majority of the audience is essential. Especially between European institutions. And finally, we believe that a European student card for students and apprentices and workers should grant generalized access to discount for cultural events, museum and exhibitions, as well as public transportation like railways, buses, to provide, like this transportation service will allow easier movement across the European Union, obviously. And so the patchwork of discounts already favoring young individuals within the EU is laudable, but ultimately complicated and counters the spirit of unity, and as European student card could also shed some light on publicly funded organisms such as independent theater and local artists advocating for human rights, democracy, and multiculturalism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilaria, and lots again to think about there. So that brings us to the end of the introduction or the introducer part of today's proceedings. And now we're going to move to our discussants. We had four. We've already heard from one, which was Koert, who's now left us. So these discussants are going to give us their kind of first read, their first takes on what we've heard so far today. And if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to start by throwing to Kalypso, Kalypso from the European University Institute. Kalypso, did you want to kick us off with some thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. I'm actually realizing I need to change where I am because suddenly I'm realizing that I'm in a silent area of the library. So apologies for that. But I would like to first of all say that Pontignano has always been a very, very stimulating space where we can exchange ideas among a lot of people, perhaps sometimes too like-minded to the us in Europe today, that Luca started us sharing. You know, we had a set of very progressive referenda question in Italy this weekend, and less than 30% participated, which tells us something about, you know, the challenge to democracy. The title of this very event today is Democracy Dead. The challenge to democracy doesn't just come from above. Yes, they're the predators of this world. We know who they are. There are people who are trying to capture the state and capture democracy, strong men and all the rest of it. But it's also the people themselves who are more or less inclined, more and more inclined to delegate their authority as the people, as the sovereigns. But at the same time, so this is the diagnosis. It's not just, it's a kind of indifference to at least the current forms of democracy. And in this case, the two, if we consider that we have three kind of forms of democracy, two of them are not doing so well. Electoral democracy, people don't go to vote as much as before, and direct democracy, referenda. And which is why I applaud the fact that in its fourth part, the paper also calls for much more participatory and deliberative democracy, and not to replace the other two kinds, but to kind of try to imagine better synergies between these different forms, which are all different ways of representing the people. And that's the first point to make, is that we need to think holistically about democracy. The second point to make is really to react to the presentations and to the great position paper, to say that indeed what you're describing, I would call a kind of democratic innovation ecosystem with different kind of pillars. This is very much in phase, by the way, with this project that I have been shepherding called Democratic Odyssey, where we have produced, after meetings in 3 cities, Athens, Florence, and Vienna, a democratic charter, a charter on democratizing crisis. And this has been produced by 300 randomly selected citizens. And some of what, I'm not surprised, but some of what I read in your paper and I just heard now is very much in phase with this, because we can advocate this or that kind of progress, but what we need to have is a commitment by all sorts of agents at all sorts of levels to these different proposals that you make. Now, I just want to say a word, Megan, on each of them very quickly. So, Luca, you picked up the part of the paper on citizenship. And indeed, there's been a long-standing call for a kind of charter of European citizenship. My only qualm with that is to ask ourselves, you know, what really is European citizenship? I would be careful in necessarily calling it supranational. I prefer the idea of transnational citizenship, and the idea that actually Europe is about mutual recognition between peoples, groups, lots of diversity and horizontality, that we should shy away from always vertical delegation of our identities and citizenship. It's about knowing each other and doing things together, but apparently semantic, supranational, transnational, but there is a deeper meaning, a call for European citizens to be kind of interested in one another. And that's partly, in fact, Anoa, what you call for in this second part on education, critical thinking, beefing up Erasmus. These are all about all sorts of more horizontal connection. You're not asking for everyone to travel to Brussels every other day, but to continue to travel horizontally. Much more needs to be made of that. Our own citizens in the Democratic Odyssey called for an Erasmus for participation and for participatory democracy. The only point here, the only small caveat is we often call for all these things that teachers in high schools need to do. And I think we need to ask ourselves how to help these teachers, because, you know, they have very broad shoulders, but they need to be helped in various ways, including websites and all the other kinds of support. The third point in the paper is Ilaria on soft power. And this is indeed a very important set of points. A European decade of culture might be a bit long. You know, do we live through decades? But maybe that's what the young generation sees as the bridge between your life now and when you see yourself as being, you know, perhaps most influential in European politics. I just want to add to that part that we're working with these days, you know, here we will be in Siena. Well, we have Fiesole here in Florence, well, next to Florence, overlooking Florence, which is also working on promoting itself as a potential Italian capital of culture. And here the symbol would be amazing because it's about connecting very local, hyper-localism and cosmopolitanism. So here, in fact, I'm making a small call to our friends in Siena. If you want to help us on this, that would be fantastic. It's a really, really exciting project. And finally, let me finish on this, Megan. We have the part on deliberative democracy, echoing again, Luca mentioning the Italian referendum, to say that I think that if only we could have a commitment that when we have referenda, we organize assemblies, citizen assemblies, participatory processes, where you have a real debate upstream before the referenda. In Switzerland, they tend to do it that way. Even there, not enough. So I would very much call for this. I hope you can amend the paper to echo the call that we have in the Democratic Odyssey for a permanent European Citizen Assembly. We just published a little book on this, which itself would then encourage a much broader ecosystem, the kind of ecosystem that you are promoting in the background paper. So I would add that dimension. I will put a link in the chat. Well, I don't think we can put a link, Megan, to those beyond the panelists, but maybe you can recopy for the people on our auditors on the webinar.
Yes, you can, Kalypso. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kalypso. I'm going to be thinking about the difference between supranational and transnational until we see each other again in Siena. Thank you so much for that really rich response and very generous response to the paper. That was lovely. So we are now going to move on to our third discussant, Sabrina Cavatorto. Are you here? Yes. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Well, I'm reacting immediately also after having heard Kalypso, Nicolaidis, that I welcome again in our discussion about democracy. I remember last when we stopped on this idea of European Citizens Assembly, and indeed last year we thought a lot starting from here, and indeed this is my point of juncture today again, because I loved so much this horizontality that she was mentioning, and the path about doing things together that I think really is, my favorite in the paper of this year. We again put at the core of our discussion, because I really think that we have to bridge, to some sense, this gap between the bubble that is in Brussels and this risk, to some extent, to have some sort of top-down Europeanism that is still very, very, very disconnected from what we live together at the very local level. And I mean, not only at the national level, but again, at the local level. I mean, very closer to citizens closer to citizens in the sense that me as a researcher and teacher, to some extent, I consider myself part of that elite that discuss daily about how democracy is important and to what extent we should think and trust our institution, mostly in the European sphere. But I'm part of the group that is separated from the society, that do not perceive how these things are crucial and to some extent how they are real. And my worrying is about how we can reduce the gap to some extent and make this feeling closer to people, and especially to young people. So I approach this year the topic of democracy when thinking to a European perspective, in a sense that I think that we should insist in thinking about bottom-up actions matched with top-down vision and possibly funding. I mean, a lot of the paper was devoted to how to support and sustain mobility, experiences across the boundaries. So I still think that the European Union should insist a lot on these. But again, the problem is awareness. I have an 18-year-old daughter, and this year, but only because of me, she discovered the Discover EU program. That is a program that the Commission has launched since a while to push for young people, I mean, those who for the first time became adults, to experience how travel all around Europe is nice, is incredible. And the Commission, make young people aware about the fact that they can do this thanks to a sponsorship by the European Commission itself. But nobody knows this, or at least, just a few people that can, be exposed to that message. And most of the time, this not happens because of the school. So when Kalypso was thinking about teachers, again, that was one of my worry. So I think that we should create, a framework where a lot of tools that already exist became part of the daily awareness of normal people. And this is something on which we all, as the European community and part of the educated people and more exposed to that awareness, we should act. So bridges, we must bridge connections. We must build connections. And since this year, the conference especially is devoted to propose concrete concrete actions, I think that we should stress a lot this dimension, because I think that we need a few things, not too much complex, but made real. And I think that we must invest in proximity-based democracy. That's something that could be realized, possibly going beyond the national dimension, because one of the points I have to ask, I mean, and in this way reacting to those who wrote the paper, is to what extent, for instance, thinking to the education system, you can think that is possible, go beyond the differences we have at the level of nation member states in terms of different propensity of national governments vis-a-vis the European dimension. So making all the societies equally exposed to have the same opportunity to enter closer in touch with democratic processes in a European perspective. So I think that bridging gaps between the EU institutions and local societal groups is the most effective way we should experiment about, possibly avoiding, you know, the mediation made by governments, national governments mostly, but also national parliaments. I mean, since a while I have been thinking that national parliaments, for instance, could have been working to reducing the gaps. But I have realized that in this sense, really, representative democracy, and especially when thinking to assemblies, well, is not the most effective way. I mean, this is an element of reality. Unfortunately, I've had to admit, but this is something that we have realized in really concrete terms. So I'm not sure if that means deliberative democracy at all. I mean, in a whole sense. But yes, for sure, we should incorporate some more extended deliberative mechanism in the way people can experience democratic practices in a European dimension. This means that the local and the European must be closer at most. And indeed, I appreciate a lot this idea of having democracy hubs and local assemblies involved, because I think that well, citizens' assembly at the European level are important, but I think that they are not enough. Because in the past we experienced, for instance, to what extent is deliberative assembly in the Conference for the Future of Europe was limited to some extent, in a sense that we had a few feedback, I mean, in the national context. So I think that we should invest more and more in having a lot of assemblies, I mean, all around the member states, and the most at the local we can. So I stop here. Thank you so much for your engagement.
Thank you so much for those thoughts, Sabrina. The one I wrote down is bottom-up action and top-down vision. So let's keep that in mind for our discussions going forward, what that might look like in practice and how we might embody that in our deliberations over the next few weeks. We're going to go now to our final discussant, who is Valentina Carlino, also from the University of Siena. Valentina.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for this very interesting webinar. I already took part in the Vision Conference last year, and it is always interesting and very stimulating to see how students and so young people try to feel to fix these questions, which are very much debated at various levels within the European Union. Well, I will be very short because many things that I had in mind while reading the papers have already been pointed out by the other discussants, which I thank. What I want to highlight is that I think it's very interesting to highlight that young people really point out the sense of belonging to the European Union. So once we discuss about how to make democracy more effective within the European Union, I have the impression that the main focus point of the paper then develops in different ways, but the main core seems to be this sense of belonging, so which we could maybe also refer to as active citizenship, which is, as we all know, a major topic also for the policy of the European Union itself. I just have in mind, for example, the recommendation of 2023 concerning the promotion of citizens' engagement and effective participation. So I think that on one side, the European Union is conscious about that, but it's very, I think, enriching to know that this is what young people want, to be concretely and effectively engaged in the action of the European Union at different levels. So this sense of belonging, of knowing that we are Europeans, and so what does it mean to be Europeans for us? But I think that this could be a very interesting key point, because when we discuss about democracy, it has been told by the other colleagues, this is also there is also the question of the problem of democracy at national level. So I study constitutional law. This is a question that we have to deal with all days. So the problem that citizens are far from the institution, and it is clear that European Union risks and tends to be even more distant to the citizens. For what I also found very interesting that, for example, during the electoral campaign for the European elections, the majority of the political parties in all the member states use the European elections to make national electoral campaigns. So this also, for example, give us the impression that also the national politicians maybe tend to use the European Union in ways which could be questionable. So maybe one solution could really be to find again, to discover again this sense of Europe, of being European, so of the European institutions. And on that point, I personally agree with Koert, which at the beginning highlighted the role of the parliament, because it is true that we have to discuss about the instruments and the tools of direct democracy, but we cannot forget that we have a representative institution within the European Union. This is very peculiarity of the European Union, and I think that we should really also focus on the role of this institution, the limits that it has, because even if it developed a lot all over the years since its creation, it is true that it still has a lot of limits. And so maybe since this is the body that represents, maybe if the citizens consider this body as really useful, maybe even when we go to vote for the creation of this body, we could be more interested in how we create this body, and then to perceive that this body has a real meaning within the European Union and a real connection with the European citizens, knowing that the European Parliament, as we all know, but maybe it could be useful to remind it to the citizens, this is a body that represents the citizens as a whole, so not the member states, and this is something that is very important within the European Union, in my opinion. And so maybe also reflecting on that, it's like this holistic vision that has been taught. It's very interesting, this notion. So thanks also for sharing the book. Maybe in this holistic vision, I could also include in my perspective, then I will read the book, this sense of belonging. So if we consider democracy as a whole, maybe we have to understand, to go back also to how we can feel that we can do something not only with direct democracy, but also with our parliament, and so the instruments of representative democracy. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Valentina, and also for those kind of important reminders about the institutions that we already have and how they need to be kind of more representative of us as Europeans. So that comes to the end of our formal proceedings. We're basically right on 7 p.m. And we have until 7:30. And that means that there is time now for as many questions as we have. So I just want to open it up to our attendees and also to our panelists. If anything has come up amongst this discussions that you want to come back to, any kind of questions at all about some of the issues we've discussed already today, or some things in the paper that have stood out to you in your preparation for this webinar today, please pop them in the chat. As the questions come through, I can then redirect them to our discussants today, making sure that we hear a little bit from everybody. And then also I just want to bring everybody's attention to Francesco's point in the chat as well, that if there are any resources that you want to share, you can do so by putting them in the chat, and they will become part of the background paper of the conference. Francesco, I see your hand is up, so I'm gonna hand it.
Yeah, very quickly, so that we then collect some question in the meantime. Just a very quick reaction from to what I heard. Everything is absolutely great. I would, however, hint to two suggestions. The first one is to be less holistic. Quite honestly, I like this word holistic up to a point. Let's try not to think that we are turning around the entire system. Okay, so it's probably more important that we have 3 ideas that can probably sort of overcome the gridlock, no? This is the thing, and let's also try to be ambitious. Going back to what Luca was saying at the very beginning of this discussion, we had referenda in Italy today and yesterday. And as everybody was expecting, absolutely everybody, we didn't get the quorum of 30%. Now, instead of thinking how can we holistically reform direct democracy, let's probably propose something. I'm not sure that what I'm proposing is agreeable by everybody, but for me, for instance, the fact that we are not using electronic voting, it is a sign that we live with our democracy in the past century and with everything else in the 21st century. It is a scandal that we are not using electronic voting, which is, by the way, something which has been experienced and consolidated in a country like Estonia, which is also an EU country. Electronic voting is at the very least something that can increase the number of people like myself who could have voted, because I was not in Rome, so I couldn't physically go to the place. So let's try also to say something which is not like an holistic theory of democracy, but something which can even become a political battle, because we need also some political battles on that, you know? because as Kalypso knows, participatory democracy is a very cute and nice literature, but still is not mainstream. So we need also something that becomes a political battle. Number two, this question of democracy and citizenship is not just good per se. It is absolutely indispensable for integration. We cannot have a common defense, a common army, somebody that calls you, Meghan, or myself to defend Europe against Russia if we do not feel ourselves somehow European citizens. So this is something with Kalypso. We checked that in the Draghi report, the word democracy is not mentioned not even once. I mean, it is absolutely essential if we want to even have further integration that more or less most of our big and conflicting political families agree, or at least on some dossier, if we do not have some popular backing of those integration. I mean, these are two things which, to me, I would suggest we really need to highlight in a very big way.
Thank you so much, Francesco. That's really good. Two very kind of like provocative ideas that we need to pick up and run with, and I'm excited for that. Shall we go now to Luca? I saw you had your hand up, and then next to Julius. And just a reminder that you don't, and then we've got Kalypso, but if anyone does want to pop their questions in the chat as well, I am happy to read them out for
We
you.
also have a Theo Rizos here. We have a question from Theo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, let's start with Luca, who I think was next, and then go to you, Julius.
But I take only a few seconds because, of course, I have lots of comments. But I think it's good to leave the discussants and the other young people here. Just a point of method, and of course, I can intervene offline during the next round of redefinition of the paper. The point of method is the fact that we have to be realistic, because this is just a little thing in a big paper that we want to bring to Pontignano and then to Siena. Probably it's good to keep a limited number of pillars. I call it pillars, but we understand each other. It's say groups of clusters of proposals, and then we may distinguish between, let's say, short-term and long-term, instead of talking about holistic versus non-holistic, long-term versus short-term. Under this point of view, I want to stress you guys, because sorry, I'm playing the role of the instructors, but I deliberately didn't mention any previous thing because this is a work from scratch. But of course, the sources indicated by Kalypso and also others now are very precious, because these are also experiences. I would mention some experiences already done, at least in terms of, let's say, academic or intellectual experiences. And then a good idea is to bring this thing of a local versus sovranational, and actually the idea of Kalypso also to approach someone in Siena. Don't forget that we go to Palazzo Pubblico, so we go to the local community temple to bring some of these ideas. So this can be another aspect to be stressed in Pontignano. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Luca. Before I go to you, Julius, thank you, Francesco, for pointing out the question that we have from Theo. I'm going to read that out, and I want you guys to have that in mind when we hear from Julius and Kalypso, and then anybody who wants to weigh in on this question from Theo can do so after that. So here's the question. How can we make sure that the People's Assembly voice will be taken into account at the EU level when it comes to shape and implement actual policies? So how can we make sure that the People's Assembly voices will be taken into account at the EU level when it comes to shape and implement actual policies? So please keep that in mind. If you have initial thoughts, you can absolutely pop them in the chat. But let's go now to Julia.
Because I'm not sure, because I didn't come up with the idea of the People's Assembly voice, sorry, the People's Assembly. if somebody here has a thought on this, I will just give the floor to that person first, because I don't want to let the question just be forgotten, basically.
Anybody want to come in now on the People's Assembly?
I'll have something to say, but I think I prefer if Julius could just say what he wanted to say, and I have a couple of things I would like to respond both to Theo, but also to Francesco. So,
okay, Julius, you're not off the hook. You got to go.
Very well. Then, because I was going to answer to Francesco as well. Well, and then the idea of belonging that we've been talking about, because I'm part of the student group that put a lot of like thought into the paper, and then also like that thought about this idea of European identity over the last couple of days. And I think the issue that we're facing is somehow that well, as a young person myself, I can feel that very much, that basically we are subjected to two different currents in politics, which is on the one hand, well, shouldn't we be more national, become more nationalistic? Because I mean, that has been working for us for the last 150 years. We know that the nation state is something that is, let's say, a working solution. Or on the other hand, should we become more European, have a kind of identity, whether you call it transnational or supranational, which obviously is in the end a different thing. But wouldn't that work better? And I think, like from a European perspective, there's a lot of reluctancy within the system, because we fear that, well, when Europe tries to implement and to push a certain kind of European identity, that this will spawn more nationalism and more nationalistic ideas in the member states. Because that's what we've been seeing. We've been seeing those kind of sovereigntist discourses over the last decade, at least 15, or even 15 to 20 years. But I think that's the wrong kind of thinking. As Francesco pointed out, we actually want to move on with integration. I think there must be some kind of flight forward. We know that the old model doesn't work. We know that it's being under attack by especially the far right in a lot of member states. And so instead of, well, basically giving them the say and giving them the discourse about this topic, I think as fervent Europeans, and I would describe myself as a fervent European, it's up to us to make the next step.
Thank you so much. Kalypso, do you want to come in now and maybe respond to some of what we heard from Julius? And then also we've got Theo's questions and just your general thoughts on the responses we've had.
yeah, I mean, clearly there's many ways of being Democrats and even radical Democrats. But I think that we are up against so much pushback against democracy around the world that we also need to think through, to throw everything at it, if I may say it in that way, Francesco. That is that by holistic democracy, I think we mean that or holistic democratization. If we want to show that there can be a new planetary politics, what I refer to as planetary politics, addressing the greatest problem of our age as a planet, we want to do democracy in many different ways that enter into synergy. This is why we did this booklet, to respond to some of the points that were made also, from the paper. The booklet is advocating the working together of the European Parliament and a new European People's Assembly that would be permanent, rotating with randomly selected citizens who would meet around Europe in cities and rural areas, which is what we have piloted as Democratic Odyssey. And I want to say something about Theo's question in a moment, but before that, to say that there are people out there who advocate that there should be only citizen assembly, just like, I don't know, in ancient Greece. Even there weren't only a citizen assembly. But I think we have invented for the last 200 years, a system of delegated sovereignty that corresponds to the Weberian state, to the fact that we have very complex challenges in our democracy, that the state apparatus with all its administration and bureaucracy is needed, but that this state itself should be about civil servants who serve the civil, who serve society. And so the question is, how do you democratize the state? And you need many channels. One channel is through the parliaments that are supposed to hold the state accountable. Another is indeed through all sorts of participatory mechanisms, from participatory budgeting to citizen assembly on substantive topic to monitoring. And none of each of them is a magic wand. None of them. So to me, I'm not advocating, and those of us who advocate a holistic approach certainly would never kind of say, this is it, that's the magic wand, participatory democracy, or electronic voting, or whatever it is. Nothing is a magic wand. We need to improve all of those and how they work together. But that's the concept. So we have a concept of holistic democracy. But not then, Francesco, but also as us, as Vision, I've been taking part in the Vision conference for a long, long time, and bringing in part the voice of Democratic Odyssey. I consider them as sister projects. And I think that what we want to say is, one thing is a conceptual understanding of how the world needs to kind of enter boldly in a third democratic transformation, in real democratic transformation. And then our strategy as advocacy. Yes, of course, Francesco. Let's pick one thing, electronic voting. Then you could have voted and made all the difference in the Italian referendum. Oops. If there is enough people who would vote electronic voting. So then we pick one or two or even three innovations, and let's go for it. Vision promotes that, yes, because that's what advocacy, and Julius, knows this very well, is about. You just pick your battles, as it were. You sequence them. But that's quite different from the conceptual holistic understanding of synergies. And so my last point would be that in this framework, Theo, the Democratic Odyssey did promote a People's Assembly and created one to show that it's possible. And I think that it's up to us, both the crew of the project, all the citizens who were involved in the 300 citizens, and as including you and others, with their wonderful input, to be ambassadors for the vision that we have developed through the Charter. And in synergy with friends like Vision, we have tried to, and this is a very interesting question for all of us advocates, how do we bring in the powers that be, decision makers, whether they're politicians, civil servants, even corporation, businesses, many different types of people who have levers on power. I mean, in our case, we tried to bring them along as we were unfolding this journey. But you can bring them ex post facto, and definitely, but if you only work with them and not with civil society, then you lose the energy and the momentum that comes from civil society. So my theory of change and progress is to ally the top down and the bottom up in ways that are constantly experimental. And I think that's also what we're talking about here.
Exactly.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Kalypso. I'm not seeing any other questions. There is still time. If people have questions, pop them in the chat, pop them in the Q&A section. I wanted to just ask Anoa and Ilaria if you guys wanted to come back in, because you've heard now a very wide range of responses to the paper that you've presented to us at the beginning. Is there anything that you wanted to come back with or comment on, or further questions that you have, or further statements that you wish to make?
Wait, I just wanted to add that obviously this paper that we have done a good draft, but we were mostly focusing on ideas as students that would reflect what students and young people, especially as we're considered a future generation, whether it's for European Union or the world in general. But so yeah, we focused on what could be implemented at the level, the youth level, let's say. And obviously there are a lot of other means that would be able to improve or to maintain the good level of democracy that we have in the European Union. So if there are any good ideas and inputs to the paper, obviously are more than welcome, and we would be happy to hear about them. Yes, that was the only adding that I wanted to do. Thank you.
Can I also say that, you know, in response to Theo's question, if colleagues and friends and the students here, you know, have ideas on his question, I give my own take, but frankly, all inputs are welcome. So that it's a conversation.
Well, I think, you know, we're really kind of getting into the meat of it here. It's the bottom up versus the top down. It's the holistic versus the specific. As we've said, I'm very pleased that we've pointed out that we're not going to entirely remake democracy in the next few weeks. Seems like a big ask, but I do think that we will come up. I mean, with this kind of these minds all together, I think we're going to come up with some very, very attractive and interesting proposals, and maybe even as Kalypso and Francesco have begun to kind of to say something quite concrete that we can bring forward. But there's such potential for really rich discussions going forward, which is all nourished by our paper written largely by the students. And you're right, I know it is a very good draft. Which I think, yeah, you can tell by the kind of richness of the discussion that we've had in response to it. I see another hand up. Julius, did you wanna come back in? We've got about 10 minutes left. And once we kind of, if we feel like we're done, if I don't have any more questions after Julius and Sabrina, we will wrap up. But yes, let's go to Julius.
Yes, I'd like to address the question that Kalypso just brought up, and then also Theo in the end, about, well, how to transfer those ideas of People's Assembly to the EU. Because I think in the end, it's the same problem we see with a parliament. Because I feel like when we come up with those citizens' assemblies, I'm not entirely against them, but when we come up with those ideas and those new entities and bodies, then we just try to make up the issues we have with, well, what we call a parliament, which is supposed to be the place where citizens come together that are being voted for in elections and that discuss the issues that are important to their constituents, for example. So I'm just wondering, do we actually need a new assembly that then needs to be able to transfer ideas and transfer suggestions to the European Union? So do we need to reinvent the wheel in the end? Or do we actually just need to, well, fix the issues we already have with the assemblies we have that have the same problem, which is, well, apparently they don't manage to take up the voices of ordinary Europeans, of voters and constituents and so on. So that's just the idea I was trying to point out.
Thank you very much, Julius. Sabrina, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, please. No, well, actually, I also would like to stress Theo's questions, but Julius already did. However, I would like to link myself to this point and also to Julius' ideas, because to some extent, I mean, extensively, we hear about how make, let's say, people's voice be heard by the European institutions. I mean, this is something accomplished to some extent. This is something dominating the debate when we ask about how to bridge the disconnect, or I mean, to make people closer to the EU. I think this is only one part of the story, in a sense that at the moment, it seems to me, and this was what I meant by saying, well, we need more bottom process. And I like this horizontality Kalypso said so much, because I think that nowadays the problem not only is to assure, let's say, the bottom to up process, but also to make the process broader at the horizontal level, in a sense that what we really need is to speak again about how democracy is crucial in daily life for people, and how democracy can be fostered, including a EU dimension. So a bigger dimension that is not only, grounded at the national level, even if this can be discussed by making people aware about the fact that Europe is national. Europe is local. I mean, there's no distinction among all these different spheres, because that is what actually, in my view, make Europe distant. So we should increase the awareness about the fact that all is now and here. I mean, all these dimensions. And the only way we can realize such a new awareness is debate about topics, debate about issues. So enlarge the way people can discuss about public decisions, public actions. That is something that people is no more aware to do, is no more willing to do about. And I mean, what we said before about the referenda in Italy is the very latest demonstration about this. So people should think that being engaged is something of added value in their life. And this is something that people do not trust anymore. So this is about contents. And then on the other, sure, we need tools. And what was said before about electronic voting is I mean, the how to say, the hot water we should discover again. So that's it. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. So I don't see any more questions. I don't see any more hands. No? Okay.
Okay. We need to wrap up, basically.
Yes.
I hope that this is also an exercise which will be useful for the next 3 webinars that we have tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. Everything has been smooth. You have been wonderful. I would say probably we need to make more concise, shorter intervention. Everybody, especially the professor, and also, by the way, do always introduce yourself. I would have very much liked to sort of know where Julius, Anoa, Ilaria, and Tito are coming from, but this will be for the next time. My big objectives, my personal big objectives, by the way, I'm very happy that Kalypso called Odyssey the sister project to Vision. My very big objectives will be, which is not very short term, I must say. Number one, we need to sort of slowly convince Mario Draghi and the rest of the mainstream that without democracy, Europe is dead. So that's number one objective. I mean, we cannot even start thinking about common defense without more internal democracy, a different kind of citizenship, number one. Number two, we need to engage citizens, people, and to make this also a political battle. There is nothing to do, which means young people, but not only you students, but also the people who are sitting in front of this pub here hopelessly and without any future. So this is the thing. No, we need to, even ourselves, to go out of our silos and make our ideas to even become political demand. That's it. I don't know if Sabrina, your hand raised means that you have another comment. Otherwise, I will see you all in Siena and hopefully in the next webinars, because these things are all connected, very much so. Okay. So thank you very much, and thank you, Megan, for tolerating a little bit of chaos, which is part of creativity. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.